Salut, bienvenue to another video. This one's going to introduce the subjunctive. Subjunctive is a complicated tense. A lot of people make mistakes in it, and even French people, because they'll try to avoid it by using something like conditional, the future tense, and to be honest, it's kind of interesting how, even though you have a present and a past and other tenses of the subjunctive, really only one is used, and that's the present one. And to be honest, in English, I know we have a subjunctive, but I didn't actually understand what it was, and I had to look up the English for subjunctive because it's complicated. Because the subjunctive is a mood. It's putting a mood on something, meaning I know that what I'm saying here is not indicative, thus it's not 100% absolute truth. When we use subjunctive, we're putting mood. So if I want to say 100% indicative, I would say God saves the children, because God saves the children. This is truth. But if I say God save the children, there's this me putting that maybe like a implied emotion that I want this to happen. Like long live the king. I want that the king lives long, not that the king lives long. The statements that you'll see most likely when you're first learning the subjunctive are not these short ones, but they do have something in common. These phrases that we're going to see all have this que in common, but they have two subjects. C'est important, one subject, que tu sois à l'heure. So one side is putting its mood on the other side. So whether you believe it's important to be on time, somebody else is putting that necessary. So when we have the subjunctive, we see that there are two clauses with two different subjects and they're connected by que. And what helps us to at first recognize when we need the subjunctive is by memorizing a list of expressions that teach these subjunctive moods. And these expressions would be things like volonté, like a wish, a desire, knowing that it's not a true absolute situation, but it's a wish. It's basically putting your will on something else, right? And here's a funny comic about somebody trying to figure out the grammar check of their own feelings, whether they would need to use a subjunctive. So things that you would put your will or your whatever, your volonté, on something else, are things like je veux que, je souhaite que, j'aime que, j'exige que, je préfère que, je aime mieux que. And if those things are followed by another subject and a verb, that other verb will need to be in the subjunctive because you're putting this wish, desire, hypothetical state on something else. So again, you need two clauses, two subjects, expressions of volonté, but also expressions of emotion, right? It's not truth, it's your opinion, man. So, for example, things like je regrette que, avoir peur que, être content. Anytime you're feeling an emotion, so there's all these content, déçu, désolé, enchanté, étonné, fâché, furieux, heureux, inquiet, ravi, surprise, ou triste que, all those would be subjunctive. C'est dommage que, it's sad, c'est étonnant que, c'est malheureux que. And notice here, mon mari ne veut pas apprendre le français. He doesn't want to do this, right? That's indicative. But here I'm putting je regrette que mon mari n'apprenne pas. Putting my feeling, my regret onto him, right? He doesn't want to learn the French. So again, I'm putting my emotion on something else. So again, expressions with will or wish will use a subjunctive. But also things that are not true. This one's a little bit complicated. Because things where you say je pense que, je crois que, il est certain que, il ne doute pas, that is truth, that is not subjunctive, it's indicative. Because think about this perspective then. If I think that this is, then it is truth. To my eye, it is true. So if I don't, however, think it, if there's doubt, and I'm not believing this alternative fact that somebody gives me, if it's not those things, if it's uncertain, if it's doubtful, then we're going to have statements like il doute que, je ne pense pas que, il ne croit pas, il n'estime pas, il n'est pas sûr que, il n'est pas vrai que, ce n'est pas évident que. And those all are doubt. So with all those expressions, you're putting your doubt on something else. But remember, It's all in the eye of the beholder, in the sense of who is ever saying this. If they put the doubt on the second half, then there's the doubt. Does that make sense? If they say je pense que, in their eye, they're saying the truth. So it really is in the eye of the one who's saying that sentence. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. Par exemple, je ne pense pas qu'il soit intelligente. Right? This is my thought. It's not everybody. It's not, or this is, I'm doubting that what other people say. Okay, so there's doubt. It's not believing. It's subjonctif. Right? Je pense qu'il est bête. I constitute that this is true. It may not be. That's true. But I am the one saying the sentence, and it is my truth, ne pense que, that says that that's indicative, not subjunctive. Il doute que le réchauffement climatique existe, so he's doubting. It's even saying it in here, doubt, so it's not true, subjunctive. Je ne doute pas que le réchauffement climatique existe. I do not doubt this, okay? I am certain, okay? This is indicative, it is fact. Okay, so let's take a look again at that. So, if you see things with subjunctive that have doubt, subjunctive. No doubt, indicative. Present tense, right? But again, remember, this is all about the eye of the beholder, whoever's saying this. For example, il croit qu'il est en forme. He thinks he's healthy. Je doute qu'il soit en forme. My opinion says he's not healthy. Okay? So there's doubt in my statement. There's no doubt in his. So his is indicative, and mine is in subjunctive. But also, we have this funny thing is if I'm asking a question, I'm the one asking the question, and I use things that don't have doubt, like penser et croire. I am questioning. I'm putting doubt on a phrase that normally would mean indicative. So if I say, pensez-vous qu'il soit en forme? Normally, il pense que, je pense que, it's indicative. But here, I'm putting the doubt on it. I'm like, hey, do you really think he's... Because I'm questioning. So I can use those forms here that are all about indicative. But if I'm writing it in a question and asking you, then I can use the subjunctive. Because I'm saying, do you think he's in shape? Okay, so again, the subjunctive, you need two clauses, two subjects, different ones, and they express volonté, émotion, and doubt. But also the last state that we're going to talk about today, being an introduction to subjunctive, is obligation. If one person puts an obligation on another person, whether they believe that they need to do that thing, then you have this subjunctive. For example, il faut que tu apprennes le français. Well, that's an obligation that I would love to put on everybody. Because I feel that it's beautiful. But you might not feel that that's necessary. So, il faut que tu apprennes subjonctif. Somebody putting obligation on somebody else. And there are other statements like il faut que, il ne faut pas que, il est nécessaire que, il est important que, il est utile que, il est urgent que. All of these, il vaudrait mieux que. These are all statements where somebody's putting an obligation on somebody else. So again, when you will use the subjunctive, when you use it, there will be two clauses, two different subjects, and they will use these types of expressions. So you could memorize those expressions, or maybe just memorize the types of those expressions to help you recall which ones they'll be. Now, formation is interesting. In order to talk about formation and subjunctive, you will need the understanding of the formation and not just regular present tense, which you've already learned, right? With être, we have all these weird irregulars in the present tense, indicative. Avoir is also weird. I mean, look at aller and faire. Oh, but aller, sans vouloir, looks, there's some sort of pattern here. Devoir, there's some sort of pattern. So some verbs that are irregular, there's some patterns. Let's look at some more regular present tense verbs now that are not irregular. So if we take a look, we see E. Look, all the ER verbs have this. All the regular IR verbs have this. Oh, irregular I verbs, they have, oh yeah, that's right. In the singular form, we have to take off one more letter before adding SST. That's right. RE verbs, oh, okay, that's right. Prendre, oh, there's a little bit irregular here. Venir, also some irregularities here, but they have patterns. And when we fill those in with the regular present tense, we're going to use that regular present tense, the il form root, as our root for the subjunctive. Okay, so I will take either parle, finisse, dort. even though finisse, normally how we pronounce he finishes, we'll see how that will look when the subjunctive. C'est mieux dorment, perdent, prennent, et viennent. Okay? So let's do a quick look at the irregular subjunctives. Just like we have irregular verbs like avoir, être, will be also very irregular in the subjunctive. So we have soit, soyons, soyez, et soit. Avoir will have I, ayo, ayi, aïe. Okay? Aïe, allions, alliez, aïe. Right? At least when we get to less irregulars, they have some sort of pattern. So fast, they will have a root of, or faire will have the root of fast, pouvoir will have the root of puisse. But in general, with all the others, we have a fun, easy pattern for just regular ER verbs, IR verbs, okay? And let's talk about that pattern. What we're going to do is take that il form, like I mentioned before, drop that ENT, and add some endings. Those endings are easy. They look like in the boot, the ER regular verbs. Outside of the boot, they look like the endings of the imparfait, right? So let's take a look at what that looks like. And notice how I put que here, because we need the que to do the subjunctive, right? Oh wow, ER verbs look almost like present tense ER verbs, except for in the nu and the vous forms. And of course you have que. Let's see what that will do to some of the other verb tenses, like réussir. Instead of je réussis, it'll be je réussisse. Instead of je perds, it'll be je perde. So there's a bit of pronunciation difference, but it seems pretty easy. There's this great and wonderful pattern that makes the formation of the subjunctive pretty easy. Now there's one petit problème. Some verbs have different stem in the il form and the nu form. And when that occurs, we have a little bit of difference in the subjunctive. So if your brain's already full, you can speed ahead just a little bit, but I'll try to explain. So normally I have said we take the il, elle form. Okay? In the boot, we will always take the il, elle form. But outside of the boot, technically, we'll be taking the nu form. And since some verbs have different ones, that will look different. So for example, prennent in the boot, but prenions et preniez outside. Other verbs that do this are like venir and vouloir, si veuille, voulions, vouliez, veuille, and that's or that I think. Que j'aille, que tu ailles, qu'il aille, but then que nous allions, que vous alliez. Other verbs like that, of course, apprennent, comprennent, viennent, reçoivent, and doivent. Okay, and then in the new form, they'll look like this. Okay, so again, let's do a quick review. Subjunctive, two clauses, two types of subjects, expressions of volonté, emotion, doubt, obligation. But the most important thing, though, is to pratique. Let's take a look and pause the video to complete these sentences. Okay, let's take a look at the answers. Did you guess gaspille, aide, recycle, protège, et polluer? Or pollue? Well, those are all just regular ER verbs and look exactly like regular ER verbs in that third person singular sense. Except for gaspille, even though it looks like it, it is not subjunctive because it's je pense que. We don't need the subjunctive. Okay, again, the most important thing I feel like for some students is to learn how to avoid the subjunctive. You can avoid the subjunctive by avoiding two clauses, by using infinitives instead, changing your sentence around. So instead of saying, je veux que tu apprennes le français, maybe, tu peux apprendre le français pour moi? Or, il faut que tu étudies. Well, il faut can be followed by an infinitive, so use just an infinitive. Il faut étudier. You can also avoid the expression by, avoid the subjunctive by avoiding expressions that use the subjunctive. Donc, instead of saying, il est possible que, you could say, je viendrai. Peut-être. Okay, so using the future. Or instead of saying je ne crois pas, just say je crois, and then put your negative in the next section. Here's a couple more examples about avoiding the subjunctive, but that is our introduction of the subjunctive. Remember, we will in the future learn more about it. So far, we've just kind of discussed one, but there are more to come. Merci, à tout à l'heure.